Hi everyone, my name is Jen. I'm an author and a book reviewer, and can I be honest with you? That sounds like I sit down to lie to you. I don't, but let's just be real. It is Thursday. It is Thursday evening and it is 9:15 at night, and I have just put my daughter to bed. I have had a very luxurious dinner of grilled cheese on toast with some steamed broccoli on the side because clearly I know how to live my life. I also had some hot sauce on that grilled cheese, and why did I say grilled cheese like I'm American? I don't say that. I say cheese on toast. I say cheese on toast. Anyway, that may have been a mistake because this is a house of plague at the moment. We've all just had norovirus. Mr. M is still in bed with it. My daughter is like weirdly fine. Babies are so resilient, and who knew that they could produce so much stuff without getting into detail and then still be absolutely fine. I am wiped, but much better than I have been these past few days. But anyway, yeah, so the hot sauce on the cheese on toast, I will report back on whether or not that was an error, because it is like one of the first things that I've eaten, and you know, hey, we live and we learn. But I wanted to film a video this evening. This is not glamorous lighting. I'm hoping that it's cozy. I'm flushed in the face because I still have a little bit of a temperature. But yeah, I wanted to chat to you. I wanted to have a catch up because I keep waiting for these like perfect moments to film and they just don't exist anymore. So I'm just gonna snatch this evening while everyone else is asleep / sick, and I am not as sick, and have books next to me and a little bit of energy to talk to you about them. So should we just do that? Let's do that. So what I want to do today is talk to you about all the books I've read so far this year, and also all the books that I have bought so far that I haven't yet talked to you about, because I think I did a book called right at the beginning of the year, which was kind of books that I bought over Christmas, the end of last year anyway. So should we talk about the books that I've read so far first? And I've confused myself actually, because some of them I've listened to on audio and I've put placeholders here to remind me I need to talk about another book. But I'm like, why is this here? 3 Hours by Rosamund Lupton. I read this years ago. Great way to confuse myself. Right, okay, let's jump in. The first book that I read in 2025 was The Unfamiliar, a queer motherhood memoir by Kirsty Logan. Now, disclaimer, Kirsty is a friend of mine, but also the reason, well, not the reason that we're friends because we're friends, but the reason that we know each other is because we like each other's writing. So we weren't friends first, who then became writers and continued to be friends. And we met each other, I guess, through work. We're work friends because we both write. We both are very interested in like queer fairy tales and all of that stuff. And this is a book that she brought out a couple of years ago. And when it was published, I wasn't in a position where I was able to read it. I was still going through IVF. I was having a very difficult time. And a few of my friends actually published books about IVF, about miscarriage, about parenthood, motherhood, and I couldn't read any of them, and that felt very sad. I mean, the surrounding circumstances as to why I couldn't read them were sadder, but I felt sad that I didn't feel able to read these books and support my friends, and that made everything else feel just, you know, a tiny bit worse. So I'm glad that I'm now in a position where I can now go back to these books and read them, and this was a joy. I'm sure this is going to be in my best books of the year come the end of 2025, and it was the first book I read, so that was such a lovely thing. And I think also it was lovely because of the way that I read it. So I decided to listen to this one on audio. It's only 4 hours long, by the way, the audiobook. If you need extra persuasion, it's only 4 hours long, and I listened to it, or some of it, when I left the house on my own for the first time since September at the beginning of January to go and meet my friend Sana for a walk. So it was like Kirsty was chatting to me in my ears because she narrates the audiobook herself, and it's one of these books that just feels as though, I don't know, you feel very privileged to be able to read it, that she's let you in on all of these details. So in this book, she's talking about herself and her wife and their journey to having a child, and trigger warnings for miscarriage in this book. And I don't have like specific things that I've underlined and can repeat to you. I just adored this book with all of my heart. I thought it was very generous. I thought that it was obviously very honest. I think another reason that it feels so personal is because it's written in the second person. So it's like she's talking about you, even though she's talking about herself. And I suppose one of the weird things about this, and why I say that Kirsty is my friend, is because obviously I am biased in some fashion, although I think I would love this book anyway. It was weird to read this book knowing the skeleton of the story anyway, because she's my friend, but having it fleshed out in a way that you would very rarely get to have, even if you were really close to somebody, because they're not going to sit down and write an entire book for you. And that's just what this felt like, and I loved it very, very much. So if you were in a position to read a book about this, about queer motherhood, about queer conception, then I would really recommend this, especially the audiobook, because her voice is just lovely. The next book is another motherhood book. Not all of these books are about motherhood. If that's not your cup of tea, don't worry about it. But this one was quite timely. We were going through a sleep regression and I was needing some audiobooks to listen to while I sat in a dark room with lots of white noise around me, trying not to fall asleep myself. And it was actually a bit of a fever dream to listen to this book, which is, the subheading is On the Metamorphosis of Pregnancy, Childbirth and Motherhood. It felt a bit too serendipitous, almost like when I read Soldier Sailor by Claire Kilroy a couple of weeks postpartum. Like it was maybe too close to home, I don't know. It was weird anyway. I enjoyed reading this book. I didn't fall head over heels in love with it as much as I know many people have done. I think I enjoyed the second half of this book more, when she was talking more about parenting rather than pregnancy. I think maybe a lot of the science she was talking about I was already aware of, so it wasn't as though I felt as though I was having revelations when I was reading this book. But I think it's a really, really wonderful book, and I especially loved how it discussed how caregiving changes the makeup of our brains, because I think that's a really important thing to understand. Before I talk to you about the next book, I have to thank very quickly the sponsor of today's video, and I am rolling my eyes at myself because I am going to say this, but it's true. Unlike this video, which has poor lighting, something that does not have poor lighting is my reading life. There we go. And my reading life does not have poor lighting because I have a reading light by the lovely Serious Readers, which I have been using for the past 4 years. I have been working with them for just as long. They first got in touch with me to ask if they could send me one of their high definition lights and said if I liked it, would I like to work with them? And I said, well, you can send it to me and I'll see if I like it. I don't just like it, I absolutely love it. And you know that because I have been working with them, as I said, for the past 4 years now. Serious Readers is a small UK-based company and they make the best reading lights in my opinion. This is the one that I have. As I said, it's a high definition light. Mine is a floor light, but they also do come as table lights if that is something that you would prefer. They have invented something called daylight wavelength technology to mimic daylight as closely as possible, which means that it is much easier to read more comfortably for longer, and it has been invaluable to me personally in my reading life. If you would like to check them out, I will leave a link in the description box down below, and you can use my code JEN to get yourself £150 off a high definition light with free UK delivery. That code also works outside of the UK. It just means you don't get free delivery if you are outside of the UK, but you can still get money off a high definition light. They are a lovely company to work with. I absolutely just take great joy in working with them because I think that what they do is great and they are just a pleasure to communicate with. So thank you very much to them for sponsoring this video and helping take care of my channel, allowing me to keep creating content for you all. I very much appreciate it. Go and take a look at what they do. On to the next book. Next up we have another audiobook. I really am in or have gone back to an audiobook era at the moment. There's something very nostalgic and lovely about that because I used to listen to audiobooks all the time when I was a kid. I listen to audiobooks a lot now anyway, but I think it only makes up about 10-15% of my reading each year. But when I was a kid, I would say it was like at least 50%. More probably, maybe 75% of my reading. I used to buy the sets of cassettes and books that bookshops used to sell. You used to be able to buy the audiobook and the physical book together. I wish that you could still do that. But you used to be able to do that, and you used to be able to get those out of the library as well. And I would always do that. And then I would read the physical form first, and then I would revisit the books over and over and over again in audiobook form. I always had an audiobook playing. I would fall asleep to an audiobook playing every single night since I was a kid until I left home. Like I just did. And I have always loved them. I just find them very comforting, but also they were a very practical thing for me, an accessibility tool, like post-surgery when my hands were in bandages and I couldn't hold a book, for instance. Audiobooks were brilliant for that. And I've gone back to that now. It is the way that I can fit reading into my life currently. I am reading some things in physical form, but the split of audio to print at this moment in time for the first 2 months of the year, I think is about 80-20. Audiobook being the 80%. We'll see how that changes, if it changes throughout the year. I don't know, but at the moment this is just what life is like, and I'm embracing it as much as possible. So the next book that I read on audio was The Last Days of Kira Mullan by Nicci French. This is their new book. It came out this month in February. And I didn't realise when I started reading it that it is a sequel to their last book, which came out last year, which was Has Anyone Seen Charlotte Salter? I'm assuming that they knew that that was going to be the beginning of a series. I don't know, maybe they didn't. I have no idea. But it's a loose series, at least so far, as in it's the same police investigator in both. But actually she doesn't appear until halfway through the book each time. And I quite like that. So if you've been here a while, you know that I'm a Nicci French stan. I have read every single one of their books, and I think they've written like nearly 30, or have written 30 by this point. And my favourite out of all of the books that they have published, they write crime thrillers, and I say they because they are a husband and wife duo. My favourite is their Frida Klein series, which is an 8-book series which I have re-listened to so many times. It is narrated by Beth Chalmers, and I just think it is chef's kiss. It is maybe not the most like perfect set of books ever, but it has such a special place in my heart. I started listening to them the end of 2019, and I don't know what it was about them, but I just fell head over heels in love. So I'm really excited that they have started a new series, and I hope that I'll fall in love with this series too. I think one of the things I loved so much about their last series was how many characters there were and how they managed to bring all of their stories together and create new threads and offshoots throughout the series, so you always felt very connected to the characters. Anyway, that's not this series, this one. This is the second one, The Last Days of Kira Mullan. It's about a woman called Nancy North who moves into a new apartment with her partner, who is a little bit not great, and someone called Kira Mullan dies by suicide. At least that is what the police say in their building. But Nancy is convinced that she did not die by suicide, and she decides that she's going to try and prove that. Something that Nicci French write a lot is unreliable female characters who are maybe going through some kind of crisis in their lives, which means that people around them are quite suspicious of their honesty, or of their, sometimes even of their lucidness. And I think that they handle that really well. And one of my favorites is House of Correction, about a woman who has been incarcerated and is trying to fight her own corner. Something I will say about this book is that maybe in places it is a little bit too much. You know, when you're reading, especially I would say crime thrillers, sometimes characters make poor decisions, and that's a way to drive the plot, and you know that that's why that's happening, and that can be a tad frustrating. But I still really enjoyed this book a lot. And Maud, who is the reoccurring character who was in the first one, it was really interesting to spend more time with her. Actually, I would say if you like the TV show Unforgotten, then you would enjoy this book and the series. In fact, when I finished listening to this, I then went back and reread Has Anyone Seen Charlotte Salter? And I enjoyed this one so much more than when I read it last year. I read this, it would have been February last year, just before I gave birth, and I liked the book, but there were certain things that really irked me about it, and when I re-listened to it, I was laughing at myself, remembering what those things were, because mainly there is one character in the book who is a police officer who is heavily pregnant, and people keep offering her seats, and she gets really frustrated and says, for goodness sake, I'm pregnant, I'm not ill, I don't need to sit down all the time. And I remember reading it thinking, just take the seat. It's difficult being pregnant, stop pretending that it's not hard. And yeah, that really did apparently get on my nerves quite a lot when I revisited the book. That didn't annoy me quite so much, which was a relief, I suppose. Something that was a bit weird rereading both, well, re-listening to the first one and reading the second one, is that they both have different narrators. So Maud's voice is very different in both books, and that threw me slightly listening to them one right after the other. I wonder if they will stick with this new narrator for the series going forward. At the end of the second book, without any spoilers, they have set up like a relationship which may, I suppose, become entwined in a crime later. There is a child mentioned at some point who, you know, is ripe for kidnap. I'm just thinking about things that happen in the Frida Klein series. So I am keen to see where they take this series next, and I look forward to reading the next one when it comes out, presumably this time next year. After reading the Nicci French books, I decided to go for Holly Bourne's new book. This is So Thrilled for You. I have never read a Holly Bourne book before, but so many of my patrons were asking me if I was planning to read this one. This book wasn't actually even on my radar, but then I looked up the blurb and then I listened to an audio sample, a sample of the audiobook, and thought it sounded brilliant, and I thought I would give it a go. And again, I don't want to put words in future me's mouth, but I feel like this is going to be one of my favourite books of the year. It was such good fun, but also so heartbreaking at points. I sobbed when I read this book, like at various points I sobbed. I also laughed so much, and it made me angry. It made me feel all of the things, and I don't think that's just because I haven't been sleeping much recently. I think that this is a really great book. It is about four friends who've been friends for a really, really long time, so uni friends, and that means that they have kind of grown apart as people, but they still come together every so often. And I think they sense that gap widening between some of the friendship group each time they meet, and there is a bit of strain there, as well as a lot of love and affection. It's a really good setup for a book. So we've got four friends. We have, let me see, we've got Charlotte, we have got Steffi, we have got Lauren, and we have got Nicci. And so we have one person who is a mother. We have one person who is pregnant, about to give birth. It is her baby shower in this book. We have one person who is child-free by choice, and we have one person who is going through IVF and has been trying to conceive for a really long time. I think what this book does, well, it does lots of things brilliantly, but the main thing that I loved about this book is how the misunderstandings between these friends are handled, and how things can be taken out of context in conversations, really internalized, and a lot of resentment can build up because things aren't talked about. I don't mean that in an annoying way, like I hate it in books when, or in life, when things could just be fixed, really simple things, if characters just spoke to each other. I'm not talking about that kind of thing. I'm talking about realistic misunderstandings where people haven't pushed a point because they feel deeply hurt. I thought that was just absolutely superb. So we open with a piñata at this baby shower being on fire. In fact, the whole house of the baby shower is on fire. It has been a massive disaster. Someone has set fire to this house, and through a series of police interviews, though mainly just following the characters throughout the course of this day, you get to find out why the house is on fire, who set it alight, and what is going to happen next. I listened to this one on audio and I really loved the listening experience, but I will say there is something that they need to fix in the audiobook version of this. The police interviews are maybe less than 1% of the entire book, but clearly the people who did the voices for the characters in the interviews were not sitting next to each other when they did them. So you have a line and then a pause of many seconds before the next line, and it is so ridiculous. I don't know how that wasn't caught during editing. I really hope they fix it for future listeners, because It is an odd mistake to have in the book, but that's the only criticism I have. The rest of the audio experience was brilliant. There are different actors who narrate the different friends' parts, and I believed in all of them so much. Lauren is the character who has given birth most recently, and probably not surprisingly, I identified with a lot of things that she was saying, though not everything, because some of the characters in this, in fact all of them, they are hyperbolic in some instances because that makes a really good story. But in essence, there were certain things that Lauren goes through in this book that I felt in my very soul. There is a scene where she is driving around trying to pick up her friend from the train station, but she knows she can't stop the car to pick up her friend because her son is asleep in the back, and if she stops he will wake up, and if he wakes up then that will throw the whole schedule and she won't be able to stay for the shower and she'll have to leave, and she can't be bothered to explain wake windows to anyone else anymore. I felt it, like physically felt that chapter when I was reading it. I loved it so very much. Also, most of the characters in this work in publishing, so there were lots of fun, you know, book references that I enjoyed. So yes, big thumbs up from me. Then I read 2 Alice Melvin books. Alice Melvin is an illustrator that I love. I have spoken about her books a lot. This is a new book. It is coming out in March, I think, so I won't show you too much of the insides because, you know, spoilers. But this is Mouse by the Sea by Alice Melvin and illustrated by Alice Melvin and words by William Snow. This is the 3rd book in her Mouse's Wood series. The first one is called Mouse's Wood, the second is called Mouse on the River, and this is Mouse by the Sea. And what I love so much about the series is the interiors. So there are just lots of flaps where you get to see inside lots of animals' homes, and in this case, lots of buildings along different promenades and seafronts as Mouse travels through different beaches, and you get to look in rock pools and all of that stuff. They are just gorgeous. You've heard me talk about them a lot. And I have also purchased a couple of her backlist books, and this is one of my favorites. This is The High Street. I would say it was for my daughter. It's not. I bought it for myself, but you know, I will read it to her when she is older. So it is about Sally, who is going to the high street to buy a yellow rose, a garden hose, a bunch of grapes, some roller skates, a cockatoo, a tin kazoo, a Persian rug, a stripy jug, a cherry tart, a candy heart. And so you visit each individual shop with her. So she goes into the bakery, for instance, and the bakery is a whole like flap that you open up and you get to see the interior of every shop on the street, and it is just the most gorgeous thing. There's something about it that reminded me of one of my favourite places, which is Beamish, which is a Victorian living museum in the northeast of England. And I think that Alice is from Saltburn, which is not that far from where I grew up. So maybe she was also inspired by Beamish. I do not know. But I love this one. If you have kids in your life who are maybe 3 to 7, then I would recommend this, but also clearly would recommend it for adults because I bought it myself and loved it. Then, this is where I was going to forget because this is where I put the books on hold. I read 3 TM Logan books. So clearly I'm in a crime thriller era at the moment, and I will be jumping into women's prize long lists soon. So my genre will shift into well, whatever genres are being longlisted for the Women's Prize, but the majority of them will probably not be crime thriller, but that is what I have been gobbling up recently. And I first read TM Logan when I read The Curfew a couple of years ago, because I kept seeing his name floated around as an alternative or a companion to Nicci French, and I'd read all the Nicci French books, and I thought, well, need to read somebody else. So I read his book, The Curfew, really enjoyed it. I've since read his backlist books, The Mother, Trust Me, 29 Seconds, and The Dream Home. I say backlist, some of them were new releases, but they're now backlist titles. And I have now read, or will have read 3. I'm reading a 3rd one at the moment, and I've read another 2. And when I finish that, I will have read all of his books. And he now has a new book coming out at the end of February, so I look forward to that. So briefly, because I don't have a huge amount to say about these books, I read The Catch, which is about a father who's very suspicious of her daughter's fiance, thinks he's up to no good, so decides to go and investigate him himself. One of those books where you're like, please, could you stop breaking into people's houses because you're gonna get yourself in trouble, but also don't stop because I'm so invested in the story, please keep going. keep making terrible decisions and I will watch, you know, like this. So I really, really loved listening to that one. Again, a little bit outrageous, but I was so on board for all of it. Just loved it so much. It was great, so compelling. I think my joint favorite now with the curfew. Then I read his book Lies, which had a brilliant setup, and I was invested in it mostly, and then the ending I didn't particularly love, but I have since looked at reviews and it seems that everyone else loves the ending. So maybe that's a me thing, I'm not sure. But the premise is that a father is driving home with his 4-year-old son one day, sees his wife's car parked in a Premier Inn car park and thinks, oh, she must be there for a work meeting. I mean, she's not there for a work meeting, clearly. And he says, oh, we should stop and surprise mummy. So he pulls into the car park, goes into the foyer with his 4-year-old son, sees his wife having an argument with a man called Ben who he knows, and he thinks, there's something not quite right about this. So he goes out to the car, waits for his wife to come out so he can ask her, but she leaves without him being able to get her attention. Then the man comes out, Ben, so he thinks, I'm going to talk to him instead. So he gets out of his car, he goes up to Ben and says, hey, you were just here with Mel, I just saw you, were you here with my wife? And he said, no, I wasn't, I don't know what you're talking about. So they have an argument, and our narrator pushes Ben, after Ben's pushed him, he pushes him back. Ben falls over, hits his head, he's bleeding. The son gets out of the car, the narrator's 4-year-old son sees this happening, has an asthma attack because he's panicking about it. This all happens at the very, very beginning of the book. I'm not ruining it for you, don't worry. And the narrator thinks, I should take my son home because I don't have his inhaler, don't want him to die, but Ben, you're on the floor and you're bleeding and I don't know if you're okay. Don't have time to call someone, or maybe I do, but I don't really want to do that because I pushed you and now you're on the floor bleeding. I'm going to run away. So he runs away home with his son, gets him his inhaler, comes back to the scene to help Ben. I mean, it's a long time since he pushed him onto the floor, really, for a head injury. Ben is gone and his car is gone. And then bad things start to happen. Honestly, one of my favourite things about TM Logan is the use of social media. His characters are always using social media, and something that I find endlessly frustrating in crime and thrillers is how characters never have their phones on them, or they conveniently forget them, because it is a really awkward plot device, right? It is a plot stopper in a crime novel, because you can do so many things on your phone. You can check things, you can call people, you know, I get it. It's a little bit of a problem to navigate. I love how TM Logan embraces social media and has his characters, you know, stalking each other and messaging people they shouldn't and hacking into people's accounts. It feels so much more believable, especially because his characters are often people who are not that savvy with social media, so they often make mistakes. Yeah, I love the family dynamics of his stories as well. I just enjoy them. And then the one that I am reading at the moment is called The Holiday, which is about 6 friends and their kids who are meeting for a week-long holiday in France. And I'm about halfway through the audiobook, and I'm presuming that something terrible is going to happen. The narrator, Kate, is convinced that her husband is having an affair. She thinks maybe he's having an affair with one of her friends who's also on this holiday, but there is questionable things going on with the kids, and that's making me feel very anxious when I'm listening to it, if I can be honest with you. Anyway, I haven't finished it, so I can't say if I really love it. But at the moment, I am enjoying the journey. So that is all the reading I have done so far this year. But as I said, I have books to haul. I decided I was going to turn this into one video because I thought it wouldn't be a long video if I just talked about the books that I had read. Clearly I was wrong. Let's get into the haul. I'm going to keep this section quite brief because I have some other work I need to do this evening, and also I would like to get some sleep tonight. So let us whiz through some things. I bought The Weekend by Charlotte Wood. I bought this because I loved Stoneyard Devotional when it was shortlisted for the Booker last year. It was my personal favourite from the shortlist, and I had tried one of her novels before, hadn't got on with it very well, but this is the one everyone said I should check out. So it is about 4 female friends who have been friends for decades, but when one of them dies, the ground shifts dangerously for the remaining 3. Struggling to recall exactly why they've remained close all these years, the grieving women gather for one last weekend at Sylvie's old beach house, but fraying tempers, an elderly dog, unwelcome guests, and too much wine collide in a storm that threatens to sweep away their friendship for good. Kind of sounds like the book I'm reading at the moment. I am in for more of that. Yes, please. This will be more literary than the one that I'm reading. Love reading Similar themes in different genres, always very good. Now, I have spoken about this recently because it's one of my most anticipated releases, and I made a most anticipated 2025 releases video. This is Victorian Psycho by Virginia Feito. I am hoping it's going to be a little like John Harding's The Girl Who Couldn't Read. The feeling it gave me when I read it, that really haunting, feels like it could have been written in the 1800s kind of gothic novel. That's what I'm hoping this is going to be. I loved her book, Mrs. March, when that came out a few years ago. It was my favourite book of the year. So very, very high hopes for that one. This is also one of my most anticipated releases. This is Kumi Kimura's Someone to Watch Over You, which is one of the Pushkin Japanese novella series, and it's translated from the Japanese by Yuki Teshima. This is about two loners who come together during the pandemic. Am I ready to read a pandemic novel? I mean, maybe. I feel weird about it, but also I feel like I want to try this one, especially because it's so short. So I will dip my toes into that. This is also one of my most anticipated releases. It's just come out. I bought it myself. This is BLOB, a love story by Maggie Saou, which is about a woman who falls in love with a blob who she realizes she can mold into her perfect man. It's supposed to be like a modern day Mrs. Caliban by Rachel Ingalls, which was one of my favorite books of the year when I read it a couple of years ago. So I would like to have more of that in my life. Yes, please. This is a proof. This is coming out in June. This is Anna James' new book. A spoiler? Not a spoiler. A side note. Anna is also a friend of mine. My goodness, my brain today. So this I'm super excited about because if you're an OG person, you will know that I adore Alice in Wonderland, and this is an Alice in Wonderland extension. It's called Alice with a Y, and it is about the granddaughter. Yeah, the granddaughter of the original Alice is grieving her father's death during the war, and then she gets summoned back to Wonderland, I presume to fix some kind of problem. And I know that Anna loves Alice in Wonderland too, and will have taken great care with this story. So I'm very much looking forward to that. Now, this is a book that may, I guess, be on the Book International long list, which is announced, I think that's next week. I've been watching some predictions videos. I think this was on Ben's prediction list. I will list Ben's video in the description box down below. If you don't follow his channel, you should. This is Hunchback by Saou Ichikawa, which is translated from the Japanese by Polly Barton. And this is an Own Voices disability book, which I am always here for. Thank you very much. It says, born with a congenital muscle disorder, Shaka Izawa has severe spinal curvature and uses an electric wheelchair and ventilator. Within the limits of her care home, her life is lived online. She studies, she tweets indignantly, she posts outrageous stories on an erotica website. One day, a new male carer reveals he has read it all, and her response, an indecent proposal. I mean, I would like to read that one. Thank you very, very much. I purchased this book here, which is The Girl Who Turned into a Pair of Chopsticks. Now, this is by Natsuko Imamura. I have read 2 of her books and haven't really loved them. So you may be thinking, Jen, why have you bought this one? This is also, oh no, it's not translated by Polly Barton. It is translated from the Japanese by Lucy North. The reason I purchased this is because it is a collection of short stories, and I am hoping that I will enjoy her short stories more. Though I'm looking at the contents and there's only 3 short stories in here, so I'm guessing this is more like Hiromi Kawakami's Record of a Night Too Brief, where we've got long form short stories. That is intriguing. She does magical realism sometimes. She wrote The Woman in the Purple Skirt. I really like the premise of that, but I wanted the book to go further. And I also read another book of hers last year, which wasn't my favourite. It was Amiko, Do You Copy? It was one of the Pushkin novella series as well. But I would like to give her another go. Don't ask me why, because, I mean, I'm questioning myself thinking about it now if I haven't enjoyed 2 of her books before. But there's just something about it. I want to go back and give her another shot. Then I discovered that Lily Hoang has a new book out, or did have a new book out. This is a few years old now. It's called A Knock at the Door. I loved her book, A Beastery. I used to talk about that book all the time, like 8 years ago on this channel, I think. She writes about race and fairy tales, and I adored her writing style, and I just had an itch the other day. I thought, has she written anything else? So I googled her and found out that she'd written this quite obscure book, and I decided to grab a copy. It says, "In fairy tales, as in life, when there is a knock at the door, there is no telling what good or what menace might reveal itself when the door is opened. In this collection of magic tales, a knock can bring charming. It could usher in the devil, or a gentle old crone with a witch in her heart. And sometimes it is better to do nothing. But no one can stop herself. The door must be opened, and we must all peep inside." Sounded intriguing. And then finally, I was sent a copy of Strange Pictures by Uketsu, who is a Japanese YouTuber, and I am not familiar with his channel at all, but I know that this is told, I think, quite uniquely. I think there's lots of drawings in this, and it's being compared to The Appeal because that was a thriller which was told in like found documents. So I think you have to do a lot of the piecing together yourself as you read this book, and I am always in the market for something like this. Who is this translated by? It's translated from the Japanese by Jim Rion. It says, "A series of drawings made by a young woman before her death, a child's disturbing picture of his home, a desperate sketch made by a murder victim in his final moments. Each contains a chilling warning. Each reveals a terrible secret hidden in plain sight." So those are all the books that I wanted to talk to you about today. I confess I am now so ready to fall into bed, and I can't because I need to do work before I go to bed, and I'm gonna crack on with that now. Thank you so much for joining me for this video. I would love to know if you've read any of these books, or if you would like to, now you've heard me talk about them. I would love to know about your relationship with reading and how you're feeling about your reading this year. I would love to know about your relationship with audiobooks, if you have one, and how that's changed over the years, given I had a bit of a chat about that earlier. And yeah, thank you for spending time with me this evening in this not great lighting, with a very disheveled woman who has had very little sleep recently and is recovering from norovirus. I appreciate that very much. If you enjoy my channel and you would like to stick around and you're not already subscribed, I would love it if you did subscribe. And if you like the content I put out and you would like to throw $1 or £1 in the tip jar over on Patreon, I would be so grateful. The support that I receive over there allows me to keep creating free content for you on here. And yeah, it's just very much appreciated. There are a few extra things over there as well if you would like to go check it out. Thank you also to Serious Readers for sponsoring this video. Go and check them out. As I said, they are linked in the description box. I'm sending lots of love to you all, and I will see you very soon when hopefully I'm a little less tired, but you know, I'm not sure how likely that is going to be. I'm sending lots of love. Bye.